Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Layered Insight is the industry's first embedded security approach for containers. Trusted by Global 1000 enterprises to secure their containerized applications, it's the only solution that requires no root privileges, has zero dependency on the underlying infrastructure, and is fully portable across any container environment. Unified DevOps and SecOps, enabling the rapid development of containerized applications without worrying about security. To learn more, please visit layeredinsight.com/ASW.
Welcome back, everyone, to the news for this week, which is March the 4th, week of March 4th. So today's March 9th, obviously. By the way, Paul, I wanted to say this is actually the anniversary of the first time that I ever appeared on Pulse Security Weekly for the InfoSec Mentors project. So,
nice.
Yeah, what a world, right? So I did want to say that we are covering a very cool story that Paul brought to my attention just before the show, which is AI predicting coding mistakes before developers make them. Paul, can you tell us more about this story?
Yeah, so this was a project that was taken on by Ubisoft. Ubisoft makes all kinds of games. I should probably know the popular games that they make. It's like
Assassin's Creed, I think, is the biggest one.
Okay, Assassin's Creed, which I've played before. I'm not very good at video games, especially Assassin's Creed. But basically, they took like 10 years worth of code or something and ran it through their AI engine and trained it to basically spot flaws in the code before you make a commit. Now, there's been lots of technology that, static analysis that has done this. This was kind of interesting because it comes from the video game world. I'm assuming it's tuned for code that is associated when you write video games. I'm also assuming we could probably, if we had enough code, train it to look at other types of projects that are outside of video gaming. But I think what makes it interesting for me is they had tons of code to train their AI engine, and for me, I think that's going to be pretty successful. It's called the Commit Assistant, and is currently being used by Ubisoft.
Yeah, I think that this is a really novel use of artificial intelligence from the perspective of taking, as a gaming company, right? Like, they have written games for well over 10 years, but having all of that kind of code repository in place to then train the AI with is hugely valuable. I mean, most companies don't keep old code or old versions of code unless it's something that is old and isn't going to be used anymore, so they don't even bother updating it or touching it. But in this case, Ubisoft or other gaming companies are certainly a really great place to start leveraging training mechanisms for artificial intelligence. Quite frankly, I think that this is probably going to be the way of the future for especially static analysis tooling, such as like what Veracode writes, and their ability to predictively prevent vulnerabilities from being introduced, and to do so in a way that's programmatic as opposed to through training. Right? It's kind of like the old phishing training problem. You can train somebody that phishing is a bad thing, but they don't necessarily pick up on it unless you continue to train them. And training developers is somewhat the same way. You can train them on security flaws and get them to stop ingesting them or putting them into your code. But at the end of the day, if you have AI that can sit there and say, by the way, I've looked at millions or maybe in some cases billions of lines of code, and I see where you're going with this, and that's actually really bad. You should actually maybe make this change instead, because you're using statements in not using predefined statements for the SQL inputs here.
They also did Just Dance, and if you ever played that on the Xbox platform, it's a pretty fun game. My kids play that.
I didn't do that. I think for me it was Guitar Hero was the big thing, but I didn't play Just Dance, unfortunately. Ubisoft is definitely one of those cool companies from a development standpoint as well. The fact that they basically have an artificial intelligence engine to prevent their game devs from introducing bugs into their games. I would not be surprised if they suddenly do a pivot in the next 3 to 5 years where they just start leveraging this for security from the budgets and security that are going to grow as a result. So who knows? This is maybe Ubisoft's next side gig.
There you go. Yeah, they make a lot. Prince of Persia. Well. Yeah, Just Dance. Far Cry.
Yep.
That's a pretty
Yep, that
popular
was
one
another good
too.
one.
Yeah, they're kind of. It's interesting how they're kind of all over the map. They make like some kids games. They do a Mario game. They're doing some Nintendo Switch work. Apparently, they've got a Tom Clancy game, Shadow Break. Yeah, some pretty cool games, and kind of all over the map. Like some of them are like games like Uno, and some of them like all the way to like Assassin's Creed, and everything else in between. So.
And maybe that's also, if you think about the value of the training that they can provide to their AI, it's varied code with varied purposes. So
and
to the
I
extent
know
that it's not. Go ahead.
Everyone's a huge fan of Care Bear's Belly Match. That's also one of their games, in case you were wondering.
I believe it. Honestly, I watched Care Bears as a kid, so that's all right. So, Paul, moving on to the next story. Were there any in the bugs, breaches, and more that caught your eye that you want to discuss before we get into the RTorrent issue with mining Monero?
Yeah, the SMB v3 null pointer dereference vulnerability I thought was interesting. This looks like a single packet blue screen of death for Windows platforms. It's like Windows 8.1 and Windows Server 2012 R2.
Yeah,
and complete total awesome write-up on this. I haven't digested the whole thing, but really cool.
Oh, it's good. I mean, it goes real deep into root cause analysis and giving you kind of all of the memory addressing and things that are related to the null pointer dereference vulnerability. You know what this reminds me of, though, Paul, that I'm sure you probably experienced, is WinNuke back in Windows 95 days. Same thing. Literally everything is old, or everything that is old is new again. This is effectively WinNuke for Windows 8.1 and Server 2012 R2. And I can't imagine that there are, a whole lot of companies that have switched over to Server 2016 and Windows 10 by this point. Most of them are still a few iterations behind. So I would not be surprised that these are the sort of things that are going to be problems for organizations that don't patch against this kind of weakness, especially with their server architecture today.
Awesome. What else we got?
So I wanted to jump into, as I highlighted kind of at the top of the show, story number 5 under the bugs, breaches, and more, which is the RTorrent client is apparently mining Monero. So what ended up happening was RTorrent client has an XML RPC vulnerability that's a misconfiguration, which allows for criminals to mine Monero off of your client. In effect, what would happen is the XML RPC communication can be initiated without undergoing any authentication procedure, which allows for, among the following, direct OS command injection with sensitive XML RPC methods allowed. It can be actively exploited by scanning the web for unprotected or exposed RTorrent clients. Exploited systems are utilized generally for mining cryptocurrency, such as Monero. The Tor anonymity network is hosting the malware itself, and Tor2Web gateway is used for accessing the malware. So effectively, you can't like blacklist a specific domain as to where it's coming from. What was interesting about this is only 3 out of the 59 mainstream antivirus software companies are able to actually detect the malware when it is dropped. And then evasion techniques are being employed so that the attackers can continue the campaign. So what is speculated in the article is that it's probably related to last year's Zealot Monero mining campaign, whereby some organizations or some cyber criminals were mining Monero in similar ways. So this was a pretty good find by F5, a networking company. One of the other ones, though, this section for bugs, breaches, and more that I thought was interesting and a little creepy is not necessarily a security vulnerability, but Amazon has had a problem with Alexa creepily laughing at people and is currently working on a fix. Paul, do you have an Alexa at home?
And here in the office.
Oh, geez. Has it started laughing at you yet?
It probably is right now because it probably heard you say that.
So basically, what ended up happening was over the past few days, people with Alexa-enabled devices are reporting that suddenly their devices are starting to laugh at them.
It's creepy.
And apparently, yeah, I know it's creepy is all get out. But what ended up happening was apparently the request to make Alexa actually go about laughing was somewhat mangled, I guess, in the way that they were interpreting that request. So a lot of other phrases that could be mentioned in the vicinity of the device would cause it to start just straight laughing. And now apparently what they've done is they're adding a few extra layers. So like rather than just starting to laugh, it would say, yes, I can laugh, and then start laughing. So it's almost like it's not listening and then just starts randomly laughing. It's giving you, the user, the inclination or the understanding that you have asked it to laugh based on something that you said. So it sounds like they're cleaning up the speech recognition, but also putting some other stopgaps in the meantime.
Yeah, you know what else is creepy is a few weeks ago we had an electrician that came in, off hours to do some upgrades. He had to kill power for the whole space and do a whole bunch of work and put in a whole new panel. We were just basically drawing more power than like the rest of the city combined for our data small little server closet here. So we had an upgrade, and so he killed power for the whole thing. And he was here working by himself because it was off hours and it was like on a Sunday. And when power came back on, the Echo devices all say, they kind of spin and they come back on, and she says, hello. And he was totally freaked out, dude. He was like pale, white as a ghost. I'm like, I see you got it back up because I get like alerts when my devices come back online. My smart things actually said, hey, I'm back online. And that's when I came back in here that was nearby. He's like, dude, I had a heart attack. He's like, I thought there was some woman in here with me. I'm like, oh no, that's just her name. She's cool. He like literally almost grabbed his pants. So
I bet. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't always think of, right? Like suddenly these devices, especially, I mean, I was losing power yesterday during the day because of the storm. I don't have anything like a smart device in my home because I'm a huge privacy nut. But with that being said, I can only imagine the number of times it would have come back on and said hello after losing power off and on throughout the day. That would have been kind of creepy, actually. Moving on, though, I did want to cover one more story in the bugs, breaches, and more section, which is Exim, a mail client, has an off-by-one remote code execution, which is CVE 2018-6789, with a full mitigation bypass. So this was actually reported on February, so last month. And what it ended up being is there is a flaw that allows an attacker to gain pre-auth remote code execution on at least 400,000 servers. And this is in all versions of Exim, which was just patched in version 4.90.1. So if you have Exim and you haven't patched yet, you should, because every version up to 4.90.1 is vulnerable. And in effect, the vulnerability came about from a calculation mistake in the decode buffer length in a B64 or B64 decode function is what it was called. So
that's pretty awesome. It's a great description too. It's a great read. Yeah.
I mean, they really go into it as well, which is nice because I think they actually have a proof of concept in there as well. So hopefully people get to the patchery because honestly, suddenly you get 400,000 devices as part of a botnet mining Monero, probably as a result of that.
Yeah, even without a proof of concept, I mean, the information that's here, you could very easily construct an exploit for that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about that at all. I did actually want to move on to if you build it, they will come section, which is story number 2. It talks about how Ethereum has just gone about fixing a serious quote-unquote eclipse flaw that could be exploited fairly trivially. In effect, what the eclipse flaw is that it's an attack that works by preventing a cryptocurrency user from connecting to honest peers. An attacker-controlled peer can then feed a target manipulated versions of the blockchain, and then the entire currency community relies on it to then reconcile the transactions and enforce contractual obligations. The real problems exist in that you could do it from just 2 unique IPs as opposed to what was believed before, which would cause the requirement of like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people kind of colluding in this process. And the real kind of heart of the problem here is that Ethereum supports smart contracts that automatically execute transactions when certain conditions in the blockchain are present. So in effect, with just 2 IP addresses getting in the middle of some sort of transactional processes, you could rewrite what the actual transactions look like, and then cause a cascading chain effect against the rest of the blockchain based on smart contract obligations. Pretty scary.
Yes, for sure. That's all I had on that. Sorry.
It's all right. I mean, Paul, we've seen the rise of cryptocurrency happen really very heavily in the last just maybe 2 years, I would say. Well, kind of, what are your thoughts on, what's driving this, and moreover, is this just kind of like us running straight for the cliff? Because it feels like they have built some of these protocols very badly over time. I mean, we hear breaches of Bitcoin companies or Bitcoin banks a lot, but here it's straight in the protocol itself that they had this flaw. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think that all these cryptocurrencies are going to be hotly attacked in a number of different ways, right? I think they're going to, like we've seen other forms of evil hacking, right? With cryptocurrency, I've seen so many stories now that like people getting scammed, attacks against the cryptocurrencies themselves, mining currency, so hacking people to mine currency, and also things where people actually physically break into a place, like you'd physically break into a bank. In Iceland, they stole like something like 300 servers or something or more that were cryptocurrency related. So where there's money, I think you're going to see attackers, and that's certainly what we've been seeing on the cryptocurrency front.
And especially with Ethereum, where with the smart contracts problem, if you can automate the attacks, like, and suddenly hit not just one contract, but dozens of contracts and walk away with Ethereum, yeah, all bad. It's thankfully, I think we're starting to see cryptocurrency platforms or ICOs or what have you start to take this a little bit more seriously. But man, have they really gone through like 4 or 5 rounds of being punched in the face before they finally are getting their act together. So I did also want to cover under the "if you build it, they will come." Apparently, Amazon earlier this week had some issues with the US East 1 data center, where in effect what was happening was they had some servers go down in the US East 1 region. Some of the direct connect services that were available inside of the AWS networking were going down, and then services like Atlassian and Twilio were suffering as a result. It's interesting to me in the sense that, the push to the cloud is huge because uptime, especially for Amazon, is probably still 5 nines, if not more. But US East 1 historically has been one of those regions that has had a whole lot of problems because it's one of the oldest regions that they actually stood up. Curious to get your thoughts, Paul, as so many more companies are moving toward a platform as a service or software as a service model where they're using things like Amazon's cloud. Are we maybe heading for disaster when we get a smaller ecosystem of maybe just a few cloud providers that could have these sorts of problems?
I don't think so. I think that Amazon and other cloud providers are in most cases going to have a lot more reliable infrastructure and less downtime than you would if you were to build it yourself. And maybe I'm speaking from older experiences that I've had where I've had racks of servers and been part of teams that maintain them. I just think that cloud providers have more resources and are better suited to providing better uptime than you could yourself. I mean, you can do a lot of different cost calculations, but I think in general, even though there are outages, I still think that your uptime is higher when you're in a cloud provider than you are in your own data center. Because they have teams of people, and that's what they do. Is in the way the architecture is, I think, just likens itself to have better uptime. And again, you can debate the cost, but you don't have to do the maintenance of those servers to keep them. So even if you can provide the same level of reliability, you're still incurring all that cost of maintaining all that hardware and powering it and updating it and applying firmware. All of that stuff costs money. So I'm still a huge proponent of doing it in the cloud because I think places like Amazon can do it better. When there is an outage, though, you're going to read about it in the headlines, and then you're going to question, like, oh, do I really want to go to the cloud? But I think if you were to do the research, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot less downtime is incurred overall in cloud services than on-premise in most environments.
Absolutely. And I think that to some degree, though, having the ability to have smart failovers where maybe you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? You're not putting all of your presentation of your applications in one region, for example. So being able to diversify your presentation of your applications or your service into multiple regions for failover purposes, although I imagine that will incur a cost, is certainly, if you need better than the 5 or 7 or however many nines that they are offering for uptime, then there are options available to you. And you're quite right, Paul. They have entire teams that are probably larger than most organizations. Like as a company, they probably have more people working on AWS alone, especially within the regions, than most companies, I would say, that are out there today. Maybe not the 1,000+ companies, but certainly those companies that are sub 500 people, they probably have more than that are actually working on this, because this is a huge moneymaker for them.
Yep.
So I just want to close up the show with a couple of food for thought items here. So I wanted to start with story number 1, which is stop JavaScript or stop JS wars. Nobody cares. And I thought that was a really good Medium article, just because there are so many people that are kind of in different camps of JavaScript as a language and the frameworks that are involved with JavaScript. And the author basically says, look, do your job, shut up, and use the right tool or the right framework for the right thing that you're trying to do. Otherwise, nobody cares, and you should stop saying that, Vue is better than this or Angular is better than that. Because at the end of the day, if one does the job well, just use it. And if it doesn't, then use something else. Because they're so similar at this point that it's not like it's a huge learning curve to adapt from one to the other. Curious to get your thoughts there, Paul, because I think that unlike other programming languages, maybe the closest example is like C or C++ or Java. But unlike those other languages, JavaScript is so diverse in terms of the frameworks that it offers that it's almost chaotic. Whereas in the old days, it was, you got to do it fast, you use C. You got to do it so that your developers are not going to make a huge number of mistakes, you do it in Java. But that's not the case with JavaScript today, especially server-side JavaScript. Curious to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think server-side JavaScript is certainly here to stay, and I think there's going to be a lot of different implementations. And I think kind of what you're saying is there's always going to be multiple frameworks and variations on a theme, and you just got to pick the one that's closer to you. And it's different before, when you were just like, okay, am I going to do it in PHP? Probably not, because that's a really crappy language. So am I going to do it in C? Well, that's not a web framework, and if I care about performance, I'll do that. Java has taken that enterprise seat for some time, and I think it's slowly being replaced by a lot of these JavaScript technologies that we talk about on the show. And I think those are going to continue to evolve, and I think there's always going to be variations on that theme, but I think that's where people are going to largely move towards. Certainly, Python with Flask and Django is in the mix as well, but I don't know. I kind of see more things going towards Node and other JavaScript-based frameworks in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just wanted to round out the show with one last one, which I thought that maybe some of your developers might appreciate, Paul, which is apparently someone has created a Minecraft GUI for running Docker containers. So this one was kind of neat. It's actually the link that I linked to is a Twitter post by someone who highlights the actual functionality of what they've done, and they actually show in this GIF what they are doing with the containers and spinning one up and deleting one, etc. And there's an actual GitHub repo, so github.com/docker/dockercraft, that allows you to effectively have a Minecraft GUI for Docker.
That's awesome. I could get my son to just run the infrastructure for us.
Yeah, or take it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
some testing.
Things.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This is probably one of the coolest things I've seen lately. I've never myself got onto Minecraft, but if you want to get people, around a table on a Friday afternoon with some pizza and teach them how to use Docker, this is the way to do it.
Absolutely.
Right here.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, with that, thank you everyone for joining us this week for another episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to git, commit, and stay classy.